So I was asked for the title for my talk, and I was going to write about how no one cares your product. And in the course of writing the talk, I digressed slightly, but the original talk, no one cares about your product, could be summed up in the quote, nobody wants a 1/4-inch drill, they need a 1/4-inch hole. And with that out of the way, I shall talk about what I'm going to talk about instead. So anybody who's been involved in project development, product planning may have come across the 7 Ps or the 5 Ps or the 6 Ps, which is proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. So what we have to do is plan the work, and then we work the plan, which doesn't always have the outcome you might expect. And if any of you, do anybody listen to the Akimbo podcast from Seth Godin? Excellent. So you won't know where I stole this story from. This is a story about a man called MacArthur Wheeler. In 1995, MacArthur Wheeler learnt that you can use lemon juice as invisible ink. And with that newfound knowledge, he did what anybody would do. He rubbed lemon juice all over his face and robbed 2 banks, convinced that the security cameras would not be able to see his face. MacArthur Wheeler had a plan. And he carried out the plan. And 3 months later, when they put the security footage on the TV, people identified him a few minutes later and they arrested him. And he said, but I used the juice. Having a plan is not enough. Now, often when we talk about planning for product development, we end up talking about what we could do, how we could plan that work, how we could test the work that we're doing, when we're going to do it, how we're going to release it. But we don't really talk about things outside of technical risk. So we tend to focus on, can it be built? And increasingly the answer to this question with lots of technical products is yes, that the thing that you are imagining can be built. Self-driving cars can be built. Social networks can be built. Can we build it? Well, increasingly the answer to this is also yes. With the proliferation of cloud services, you can deploy, even with a small team or a solo developer, stuff that 20 years ago would have taken venture capital and a data center to run. So yes, it probably can be built, and yes, you probably can build it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should. Now, if you're as old as me, you might remember the underpant gnomes from South Park, whose business plan was to collect the underpants, and that's what they were doing. But not entirely sure how that tied into making any kind of profit. So as well as looking at technical risks, you have to also look at market risks. So don't just ask, could we build this, but ask whether anyone would care if you did. It's a self-promotion on my part, but stuff that I have built for myself and for my own amusement over the last few years include an invoice payment tool for freelancers, a meditation app for iOS, a jobs board, and a greetings card website. And I have made almost precisely no money. Although I did actually find out, looking in Google Analytics, that someone in Sweden used my meditation app every day for 6 months. They must be mental. The stuff that other people have made. So in the late 90s, there was a project which you might have read about if you read the tech press, Wired, those kind of magazines before there were websites for this kind of thing, about Project Ginger. And it had investment from people like Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs. And it was going to revolutionize personal transport. Steve Jobs said it may even be more important than the personal computer. And in 2001, Project Ginger launched the Segway. And now they had sales targets to sell 50 to 100,000 of these in the first year. And they did sell 50,000 of them. And it only took them 8 years to do it. And as you see, we all now whistle around the countryside on our Segways. But just because it can be done doesn't necessarily mean that you should. The Juicero is a home juicing device. It's a marvel of technical engineering. It brings tons of pressure onto these pre-packed cartridges that have juice and vegetables and fruit in them to make you freshly squeezed juice every morning. And if you own the device, you can subscribe to the service and you can have the pouches of juice delivered. But it turns out the device costs $600 and the juice subscription makes it more expensive than going out to a juice bar to buy it. And to add insult to injury, the tech journalist who was reviewing it found you could squeeze the juice out of the pouch more quickly with your hands. Maybe you'd like flavoured water for your pets. Crispy beef flavoured water for your dog. Or my favourite one in researching this, cheese flavoured lip balm. Just because you can build it doesn't mean you should. I kind of already said this. So don't ask just can we build it, but should we build it? So there's a book called Running Lean. It's written by Ash Moira, and it's one of the series from Eric Ries's Lean Startup series. This book here, I skipped ahead a slide, haven't I? And this talks about how you can look at the plans for your work outside of the product that you're building. And a key tool within his book is something called the Lean Canvas, which is based on a business model canvas, which I'll mention in a minute. And he talks about how you can think about all of the different areas that you might need to start a product that could be successful. So this is who are your customer segments, who are you targeting, and who are your early adopters within that customer segment. And what problems do these people have? And what do they do right now to solve these problems? Because if they're not doing anything to solve these problems, then they probably don't care at all. So if you know who your customers are and you know what problems they really need solving, you can put together a value proposition that tells them how you're going to solve their problem for them and see if it resonates with them. Once you've got that together, you might think about the channels you're going to use to reach your customers, how they're going to find out about you and how you're going to get your product to them. And then you might want to start thinking about the solution that you're actually going to build and the key metrics and activities that would carry out in order to build that product and know that you're on track to delivering it. You'll want to think about how much money that product's going to make you and how much it's going to cost you to make it. And in this version of the canvas, Ash also talks about your unfair advantage. What is the thing about you and your team that would be hard for somebody else to copy or buy that gives you a bit of a defensible moat around the work that you're doing? So this is a lean canvas that I actually found online when I was researching my talk, and it is remarkably similar, the product, to the freelancer invoicing tool that I mentioned earlier. So it's quite a good one to copy. It shows how generic the idea was. So their original customer segment is service-oriented businesses. That's consulting firms, freelancers, law firms, groundskeepers, photographers. And they think the problem that those people might have is that it's very intimidating setting up a payment tool, that PayPal is a pain, and that customers pay very slowly. And so the value proposition is that we offer you something you can get started with very quickly. There's no transaction limits. Setting it up is really simple, and it's easy for your clients to use to pay you. And the solution is to build a product that offers these options, that allows you to accept large payments and that cuts out the associated setup with PayPal and so on. So the channels that they identified that they wanted to use for their product is FreshBooks advertising, Google Ads, and organic contacts. And the key activities is basically build the thing. And the unfair advantage is we're good software developers and we're going to use Stripe, which, well, I built one of these, so that's not an unfair advantage. They looked at how much it would cost them to run the ad campaigns, how much the hosting would cost, and how much they would need to actually design and develop it, and worked out what subscription plans they would need and what their break-even would be for this to work. So if you go through each of these different areas, instead of thinking about what we are planning to do, think about what the risk is associated with this assumption. Because until you've built this thing and you've got a business that's running, this is an assumption that you can get hold of these customers. And it's also an assumption that they have these problems. And so on it, you're assuming that this value proposition will resonate with them. You're assuming that you can reach them through these channels. You're assuming that this solution actually solves the problems for those people in a way that they're willing to pay for. You're assuming you can build it, which is where we tend to focus most of our project management work. And you're making assumptions about how defensible your position is, how much money you're going to make, and how much it's going to cost you. So instead of just thinking about how do we carry out the tasks that we think we need in order to execute this plan, look at the biggest risks and the biggest assumptions that are in this plan and make a backlog out of those instead. Now, I had a go at just prioritizing the top few. I think the biggest risk on that entire backlog is that we can reach these people. Because if you're just relying on Google Ads, well, that gets really expensive really quickly as soon as you have a product that anyone cares about. And maybe FreshBooks will close down their list. And the third channel that these developers had identified was they were going to work through their contacts. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have that many contacts that I could sell service-oriented software to before I started to need a sales force. So the second biggest risk is that their customers, I think at least, will care about this value proposition, that they can propose something to these people and it will resonate with them. And only third on the list is that the product will work. And fourth is, well, can we build it? Digressing somewhere and getting into the messy bit at the end of my slides. This is a value proposition canvas from a book called Value Proposition Design by Alex Osterwalder. And this is a tool to use to identify the gains that your customers might be trying to make, the pains that they might be experiencing, and the jobs that they're trying to get done, and how you could put together a value proposition that corresponds to that, with products and services that allow them to get their jobs done, help them to achieve the gains that they're trying to make in their life or their career, and how to give them the pain relievers that they need to address their pains. And these are in a series of books which are a business model generation, which was the original, value proposition design, and this one, which came out last Friday, and it's on my Christmas list, so I can't tell you if it's any good because I'm not allowed to buy it for myself. And there's also, if you're interested in learning any more about this, you look at the Jobs to be Done framework. There are lots of publications and books on this, talking about how people have jobs to be done and how your software and your tools can help them address those jobs. And some of those jobs are about achieving specific things in their life outside of their tasks that they've got to do, whether that's being well regarded at work, whether that is getting more time back at home. Those are all jobs that people have to do. So you can think about all of those things when you're putting together a value proposition. So to reiterate, the real risks to your product are people even looking for a solution to this problem? Will people pay for this? Can you reach these people? And will they buy it from you? Just because you can build it doesn't mean you should. This is real. Donald Trump tries to sell steak. I'm done. Thank you very much.